Okay, now we go from Russia to the Czech Republic, to a Czech composer, one of my favorites, Antonín Dvořák. Antonín Dvořák. That's how you say that, not Dvorak. 1841 to 1904. 1841 to 1904. One of the leading composers of Czech national music, and I was just in Prague recently in October, and they adore, still, Dvořák. I mean, really, just as much as they adore Chopin in Poland, they adore Dvořák in Prague. He infused his symphonies and his chamber music with the spirit of Bohemian folk song and dance. You really, really hear it in his music. Dvořák's father was a poor innkeeper and butcher in a small town near Prague. Dvořák left home at 16 to study music, so he was an early starter. For years, earned a meager living playing in an opera orchestra, and he was really a little-known composer until his works came to the attention of the German master Brahms, Johannes Brahms. And Brahms recommended Dvořák to his own publisher. I took much pleasure in the works of Dvořák of Prague. If you play them through, you will enjoy them as much as I have done. Decidedly, he's a very talented man. And with Brahms, unfortunately, we're not going to get to one of my favorite composers named Brahms, but Brahms, very, very successful German composer. And for Brahms to give Dvořák the backing, that was pretty wonderful. And his fame spread. He was invited to England. The melodiousness of his symphonies and chamber music, I highly recommend it. I know I've just endorsed Tchaikovsky wholeheartedly, and I'm going to do the same thing with Dvořák. It is lovely, melodic music. Not only does he have symphonies and chamber music, he has Slavonic dances, all of them infused with that wonderful atmosphere. And what's very interesting is in 1892, Dvořák went to New York City, where he spent almost 3 years as director of the National Conservatory of Music. Pretty cool. He came over here. He received a salary of about $15,000. Wow. But it was about 20 times what he was earning as professor of at the Prague Conservatory. Dvořák learned about the American heartland by spending a summer. Are you guys ready? He spent the summer. You guys ready? In Spillville, Iowa. How many people have been to Spillville? Why don't you tell us about Spillville? What's Spillville like, ma'am? My name's Oprah Winfrey. Hi.
Okay, it's very little.
It's very little.
And you can about count the number of people on the street. Mm-hmm. Very simple. Very.
Any Czech restaurants there by any chance?
I just saw the clock tower place.
The clock tower, okay. Okay, well, in Dvořák's day, when he went out there, thank you very much for your commentary. I have to stick my wire back on or Mike gets upset. He spent some time in Spillville, Iowa, because there was a colony of Czechs that lived there. So here he goes out to Spillville, Iowa, okay? And when he toured around America, he discovered something very interesting. He discovered American music. Okay. What did he discover? Well, he encouraged, this is really kind of pathetic here, he encouraged American composers to write nationalistic music. A Czech comes over and says, hey, you've got great music over here. Wake up. Well, that's not totally true. I was just being dramatic. Imagine that. But he really was very interested in Native American melodies and African American spirituals. And so guess what ended up in his music? That. And so the piece that I'm going to talk about contains the American spirit as well as the Czech spirit. It is called the New World Symphony. Some of you probably have already heard it before in your lifetime, the tunes from it. It is a lovely, lovely piece of music that contains a spiritual, a Negro spiritual, in the slow movement. And we'll see if you have heard it before. He wrote his New World Symphony in E minor during his first year in the United States. And again, we're going to combine two different countries here. And we're going to hear syncopations, remember that word? We're going to hear some different scale combinations going on, and that's certainly from the Czech spirit that he infuses within this symphony. Colorful orchestration, very interesting rhythm. That's the first time, when I'm listening to it on the radio and it's in the middle of something, I probably would pick Dvořák because, well, of the rhythm, most likely. And so we're going to listen to the first movement of Symphony No. 9 in E minor, and this is the New World Symphony. It has an opening slow adagio and then breaks into the allegro molto. Very, very, very exciting piece of music. That was Dvořák, our Czech composer. And so we've looked at a couple of different countries and given you a taste, but there's a lot out there that I can't put over the airwaves. So you've got to go investigate yourself, all this wonderful music that is not American and maybe not Western European. There's Eastern Europe and there's many, many different countries. So enjoy this music. Go find it. Seek it out. Hopefully I've given you a little taste. And so the next time I see you will be Italian and German opera. Puccini, Verdi, and Wagner. Okay, thank you. Welcome. This evening, we're going to continue our discussion about opera. I say continue because we certainly have already brought in the concept of opera. It all started with Mr. Monteverdi in 1607. He is to blame that opera became all the rage, right? Remember, Mr. Monteverdi wrote the first opera in 1607, Orfeo. And so if we need to blame it on somebody, I suppose we blame it on him. And so for well over now, 300 years or so, we are certainly seeing that opera is one of the most alluring forms of musical entertainment. We have seen the rise of opera houses springing up all over Europe, and of course, as we'll see, the United States as well. And we're seeing that it is really attractive to everyone, not only the wealthy, but also the middle class and also the poor. I mean, it was a very alluring form of musical entertainment. And so we have followed opera from Monteverdi as we go up into Purcell, we talked about, in the Baroque period, Dido and Aeneas. And we saw that he was kind of cutting down opera a little bit, not making it as long and very understandable. And then we looked at Mozart, the master, composed incredible operas. And we were starting to really relate to these characters through the music, really relating to them. And now we are in the Romantic period. And I tell you that this is the best opera you can be a part of because, again, it is very human. We identify with Mimi, who is sick, and she falls in love, and she dies in Rodolfo's arms. It's all very, very interesting. Lust, greed, adultery, all those great things we love on prime time are stuck right here in Italian, especially Italian romantic opera. So, where do we start? And that is very simple. We start with the music of Giuseppe Verdi. Giuseppe Verdi, 1813 to 1901. Giuseppe Verdi, if you translate that into English, is Joe Green. So his name is very, very simple. And Giuseppe Verdi said, "It is better to invent reality than to copy it." And these words from this great man certainly lasted a lifetime for him. He was one of the most original creators of Italian opera and did so much for it. And he lived a very long time. He lived a very long time, and he was still composing operas at age 80. So we have an enormous output from Giuseppe Verdi. And certainly one of, if you like opera, that's certainly one of the first places that you would go, would be Verdi's music. Success is impossible for me if I cannot write as my heart dictates. A very romantic ideal. He is certainly one of the most widely loved operatic composers, and his personality is in this music, the history of Italy in this music. His flair for the love of drama is in his music. He loved Shakespeare, and of course one of his greatest operas, Othello, Macbeth, Falstaff. You know, I mean, he really, really loved Shakespeare. And he was born in northern Italy, very, very, very poor family, and lived in poverty. But his talent attracted the attention of a prosperous merchant in the neighboring town of Busseto, which was near Milan. And this was a music lover who basically took Verdi under his wings and paid for his musical education. And he also fell in love with this benefactor's daughter. And so at age 23, and his wife Margherita, 16, they are married. 3 years later, he returns to make his way in Milano, make his way in Milan. And of course, we all probably know that one of the greatest opera houses is located in Milan, Italy, and that is La Scala. And that's where he was headed. Verdi had a somewhat successful opera premiered in 1839. It brought him enough success to give him commissions to do more operas. And as Verdi was starting to succeed, he had many crises going on. First of all, he lost 2 children, one basically right after another to illness, and then he lost his wife. And quite often we'll get the angry Verdi, angry at God Verdi, quite a bit within the operas. And with this crisis, it was very interesting. He says, my family had been destroyed, and in the midst of these trials, I had to fulfill my engagement and write a comic opera. And so he was in the middle of writing Un giorno di regno, King for a Day, which failed miserably. In a sudden moment of despondency, I despaired of finding any comfort in my art and resolved to give up composing. Well, thank God he didn't, because he went right back and one night happened to meet the impresario of La Scala and forced him to take home a libretto, right, the text of the opera. Forced Verdi to take home a libretto. And this libretto was called in Italian Nabucco, which was the king of Babylon. Now, okay, so Verdi goes home and he reads this and he says, I stood for a moment motionless before it. The book opened as I threw it down. My eyes fell on the page and I read the line, Va pensiero sull'ale dorate. Go, my thought, on golden wings. This is the first line of the chorus of captive Jews who by the waters of Babylon mourn their ravished land. Resolved as I was never to write again, I stifled my emotion, shut the book, went to bed, and put out the candle. I tried to sleep, but Nabucco was running a mad course through my brain. In this fashion, Verdi went back to composing. And the opera, Nabucco, was presented in La Scala in 1842. And this was a triumph. And it was a triumph not only personally for Verdi, but there's a lot more to this story. Italy at the time was in the process of birth as a nation. Okay? They were in the process of organizing themselves as a nation. And the Patriotic Party aimed at liberation from the Habsburg dynasty, as we know. And so we are going to end up, certainly, in revolution. But what was interesting is he charged up his operas, especially his early operas. He charged them up to get you, the audience, as Italians, charged up about this revolution, charged up about Italy's birth as a nation. And so the chorus of the exiled Jews from this opera became a patriotic song, you see. Verdi identified with this exile. He identified with this freedom. And you see, people got all riled up about this. Verdi was a very political individual. He will end up as one of the original members of the Italian Parliament. I mean, he very much put these political ideas within his operas. And so, what we have here is an extraordinary man, not only in the form of opera, but of course also within the history of Italy as well. His music itself has incredible dynamic force. The choruses are spectacles. The ensembles are unbelievably powerful. There's a lot of power within Verdi's music. One writer called it agitators' music. It leaves you agitated. It gets you going. And that's certainly true, I believe, that Verdi was quite an agitator. And he filled the role of the people's artist at the time. And so people were crazy about this man. I mean, he was revered. I mean, when he died, it was a horrible, horrible, horrible day for Italy. Even in his fame, he retained his very simple, he was a very simple man, and he retained this simplicity his whole life, even with his fame. He did marry again a singer by the name of Giuseppina Strafoni. Isn't that a beautiful name? And she was a wonderful woman who created a lot of the leading roles in his early operas. And after, like I said, after Italy won its independence, Verdi actually was urged to take the stand to the first parliament because of the prestige of his name would help form a new state. And so he was a very political man, and I think that is very interesting that not only was he a composer, but he was very, very, very involved with other matters. It has amazing passion. I think everybody who watches a Verdi opera is very, very tuned into the kind of energy and passion that his music gives us. A true Italian that he was, he based his art of melody, which to him was the most immediate expression of human feeling. Art without spontaneity, naturalness, and simplicity, he maintained, is no art. And so it is full of beautiful, beautiful music. And of course, Italian opera, we have an emphasis on melody. Also, you don't sing Italian opera like you sing Mozart. Mozart has to be pristine. Mozart has to be perfect. That's not saying Verdi doesn't have to be perfect. It's just different. The voice rises and falls to huge notes in a very different way. And as we listen to it, I think you'll get that idea. Especially, hopefully, you'll all go to one and get that idea. But his operas, some of them, I just want to point out to you. I talked about Nabucco, 1842, The Great Macbeth, 1847, Rigoletto, which we're going to look at a little closer, 1851. One of my personal favorites, La Traviata, or The Lost One, was premiered in 1853. And then we have also the great Aida, which was actually written for the opening of the Suez Canal, which is interesting. Othello, 1887, and Falstaff, 1893. And he was still creating masterpieces at 80 years old. And certainly, we really have not said that about many composers so far, that they were creating these incredible masterpieces at 80 years old. So the opera that we're going to quickly look at is Rigoletto. Rigoletto. Verdi dared to create an operatic hero out of a hunchback court jester. A hunchback court jester. His name, Rigoletto. And his only real redeeming quality is his intense love for his daughter. We immediately see that he's just kind of an outcast. You automatically feel kind of bad for him. But then you see his intense love for his daughter, Gilda, and you kind of get a sense that, yeah, this man has a lot of intense love, and so it's a very interesting paradox. Rigoletto's master, the Duke of Mantua, wins Gilda's love, you see. And when the Duke, unfortunately the Duke is a real playboy, and he seduces many, many women, but when the Duke first met Gilda, he was disguised as a poor student. And so Gilda falls in love with him, and then eventually she finds out that he is the Duke, but it doesn't matter to Gilda. But when the Duke seduces the innocent girl, Rigoletto, you see, plots his death. Gilda loves the Duke even after learning about his horrible character, and she ultimately sacrifices her own life to save his. And of course, this makes for a powerful drama. At the very end of the opera, you think that some innocent person has been killed, and there is a bag, and when Rigoletto opens the bag with a body in it, it is Gilda. Gilda sacrifices herself for the man that she loves. So it's a case of course, suicide, but love, dying for honor and for love. And it is a very gripping opera, and some of the greatest melodies come out of this opera, and we are going to listen to one. It's the aria, La Donna Mobile, and quartet, and the quartet as well. And it is located in Act 3. And these are certainly very, very popular pieces within the opera. And the first thing I want to do is let you listen to it. Listen to it, and please follow the text as you go, because it is very important that you do that, because there's a lot going on within this scene. So please do that. We are going to be listening to the very carefree and tuneful La Donna Mobile, Woman is Fickle. Okay. It perfectly expresses the Duke's pleasure-loving personality, that's for sure. But then on the other hand, you're going to hear Rigoletto and Gilda, who are peering through the cracks, looking at the Duke flirting with another woman, and they're going to have a very different idea about that. So this is a very, very beautiful part of Act 3. That was part of Act 3 from the opera Rigoletto by Verdi. And I have one thing to say. There are 3 sexes, men, women, and tenors. This was a very good example. This was a supernatural human being singing this La Donna Mobile, and he held that last note for a very, very long time. Verdi gives us 4 conflicting emotions going on at one time within this scene and within this ensemble. And it creates extraordinary emotion for us. You don't quite know how to feel and who to feel for. And it's all going to explode. And so this art form is one now that we can all relate to. We can all specifically relate to every one of those emotions going on. Giuseppe Verdi, a great genius of Italian opera. He also composed one of my favorite works, a Requiem Mass. We know a Requiem Mass is a Mass for the dead. We talked about that with Mozart. And if you like this sort of thing, run out and get a recording of it. It is one of my personal favorites, the Verdi Requiem. It is a lovely, lovely piece of music. And again, a very much a favorite composer. Now, the other guy, the other Italian that certainly followed in Verdi's footsteps, Giacomo Puccini. Not as poor to begin with as Verdi, but some of the best loved operas are Puccini's. Some of the operas that now are based on movies, for instance, Moonstruck with Cher and Nicolas Cage, a direct line to La Bohème, which we're going to look at. Also, the musical Rent is, as well, a direct line to La Bohème. And I think it's the reason why is because, again, it is so appealing to us as humans. We can relate to these characters. Puccini succeeded, and his dates, by the way, 1858 to 1924. And he succeeded Verdi as the most important Italian opera composer of his time. Puccini came from a long line of composers and church organists. He was a student at the Milan Conservatory for 3 years between 1880 and 1883. And he lived a hand-to-mouth existence. The success of Puccini's first opera, written shortly after his graduation, brought him to the attention of Italy's leading music publishers, and were coming at him with commissions. And his first opera, written in 1893, became very well known throughout Italy, and it's still done today in standard repertoire. It's called Manon Lescaut. And 1896, La Bohème. And this is, you've got to say, this is one of the most famous operas, The Bohemians, a picture of bohemian life, a picture of love, a picture of loss, something we can all relate to. And we're going to talk about that one in a minute. Two other very popular operas, Tosca, 1900, Madame Butterfly, 1904. Madame Butterfly really gets you, you know? I mean, she's actually involved with an American. She's involved with an American serviceman. He buys his wife, and she has his baby. He comes back to get her. He wants the child, and she kills herself. It's terrible, terrible. At the end, you're a mess. You know, you're a mess. And that's what happens with movies. Why do we go to movies? You know, why do we go see these gut-wrenching films? Because when we're a mess, we feel our feelings, we feel human. And it's the same thing with opera.